Welcome to Gnostic or Not. For this episode we have a special guest, our own intrepid researcher, Thomas White.
It's great to be back.
Thomas has been busy researching this phenomenon known as Gnosticism, which, some suggest, may very well be the greatest threat facing Christianity today.
That's right.
So what can you tell our viewers about these Gnostics, and the dangers they represent?
I've studied the Gnostic texts, especially those of the Nag Hammadi library. Though these texts are ancient, the threat they represent is a new one, since before these texts were discovered in 1945, there was little information of Gnosticism available.
Now, apparently, these texts present some rather radical views of Jesus Christ, God, and the Church.
Absolutely. I'd like to give a demonstration of how one group of these Gnostics, known as the School of Thomas, presented their alternative understanding.
Excellent. Is this School of Thomas the one that was supposedly founded by the Apostle Thomas?
That's right. The Apostle is known to us as Doubting Thomas, thanks to his depiction within the Gospel of John. He is supposed to have written the Gospel of Thomas, one of the most famous of the Gnostic texts found at Nag Hammadi.
So, about your demonstration.
Well, Jonathan, I'm going to need a little help.
Sure. What can I do?
I need you to give us a reading of one of the most powerful of the parables, that of the Prodigal Son.
So you want me to read from Luke chapter 15?
Yes, just let the Gospel speak for itself.
All right, I'll just begin. Then all the tax collectors and sinners drew near to him, to hear him, and the Pharisees and scribes complained, saying, "This man receives sinners and eats with them." So he spoke this parable to them, saying, "What man of you, having 100 sheep, if he loses one of them, does not leave the 99 in the wilderness, and go after the one which is lost until he finds it? And when he has found it, he lays it on his shoulders, rejoicing. And when he comes home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, saying to them, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found my sheep which was lost.' Just so, I tell you, there is joy before the angels of God over one sinner who repents. Or what woman, having 10 silver coins, if she loses one coin, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search carefully until she finds it? And when she has found it, she calls her friends and neighbors together, saying, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found the piece which I lost.' Just so, I tell you, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous persons who need no repentance." Then he said, "A certain man had 2 sons. And the younger of them said to his father,
'Father, give me the portion of goods that falls to me.'
So he divided to them his livelihood, and not many days after, the younger son gathered all together, journeyed to a far country, and there wasted his possessions with reckless living." But when he had spent everything, there arose a severe famine in that land, and he began to be in want. Then he went and joined himself to a citizen of that country, and he sent him into his fields to feed swine. And he would gladly have filled his stomach with the pods that the swine ate, and no one gave him anything. But when he came to himself, he said,
"How many of my father's hired servants have bread enough and to spare, and I perish with hunger? I will arise and go to my father, and will say to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven, and before you, and I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Make me like one of your hired servants.'
And he arose and came to his father. But when he was still a great way off, his father saw him, and had compassion, and ran, and fell on his neck, and kissed him. And the son said to him,
'I have sinned against heaven, and in your sight, and am no longer worthy to be called your son.'
But the father said to his servants, 'Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand and shoes on his feet. And bring the fatted calf, and kill it. And let us eat, and be merry, for this my son was dead, and is alive again, he was lost, and is found. And they began to be merry. Now his elder son was in the field. As he came and drew close to the house, he heard music and dancing, and he called one of the servants, and asked what these things meant. And he said to him, Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him safe and sound. And he was angry, and would not go in. Therefore came his father out, and entreated him. And he answering, said to his father, Lo, these many years do I serve you, neither transgressed I, at any time, your commandment, and yet you never gave me a kid, that I might make merry with my friends, but as soon as this, your son, has come, who has devoured your living with harlots, you have killed for him the fatted calf. And he said to him, Son, you are ever with me, and all that I have is yours. It was necessary that we make merry, and be glad, for this your brother was dead, and is alive again, and was lost, and is found.
Thank you for the dramatic reading of Luke, chapter 15.
As always, it is an honor to read the Lord's Word aloud to all our viewers. However, I have a question. Do the Gnostics mean to claim that the section I have just finished reading somehow has something to do with Gnosticism?
That is exactly what they claim. They say that your understanding of the chapter, that it all has to do with illustrating how pleasing to God the conversion of sinners is but the surface reading, while the Gnostics interpret the chapter in a much different manner.
Why, that is absolutely absurd. What sort of justification could they possibly offer for making such an outrageous claim?
There is a saying from the Gospel of Thomas, saying number 60. They saw a Samaritan carrying a lamb, going to Judea. He said to his disciples, What will this man do with the lamb? They said to him,
Kill it and eat it.
He said to them, While it is alive, he will not eat it, but only when he kills it, and it becomes a corpse. They said to him,
Otherwise he cannot do it.
He said to them, You also seek a place for yourself to rest, that you not become a corpse and be consumed.
I don't see what relevance that has.
The Gnostics claim that this man and his lamb are identical to those in Luke. In fact, this saying highlights an aspect of the story, which doesn't exactly agree with the surface reading. Here is a shepherd who lost his lamb and searched until he found it. Then after he found it, he called his friends and neighbors together to rejoice. Have you ever questioned why his friends and neighbors would come together to celebrate the finding of his lost lamb? Of course, they would be happy for him, but if you are going to call your friends and neighbors together, you need to offer them something. Why should they share in his happiness, unless they also can share in the lamb? After all, he had lost it. It was gone, but then he found it. Why not share the lamb with others when he had already considered it as gone? And how to share a lamb among his friends and neighbors? What better way than to share its flesh? The same issue exists with a woman who lost her coin and then found it. She also calls her friends and neighbors together to rejoice. But what is there for the others to celebrate, unless the woman also decides to share the coin that she had already considered as lost? And how better to share the coin than to spend it on supplies for a party?
Fine, but such an explanation fails in the case of the prodigal son. In that instance, the text clearly speaks of a fattened calf that will be slaughtered for the celebration.
You make an excellent point. Let's review the words of the Father.
Bring forth the best robe, and put it on him, and put a ring on his hand, and shoes on his feet. And bring the fatted calf, and kill it. And let us eat, and be merry, for this my son was dead, and is alive again, he was lost, and is found.
Notice the ritual nature of the proceedings. The younger son is to be adorned in the finest robe, and a special ring is to be put on his hand, and shoes on his feet. Then notice the ambiguity inherent in the next sentence.
And bring the fatted calf, and kill it.
There are two possible readings. There is the one we are all familiar with, where, in order to celebrate the return of his younger son, the father calls for the fatted calf to be killed. The other possible reading is that the younger son is being dressed in the ceremonial robes of a sacrificial victim. That he is the fatted calf about to be slaughtered.
That is simply absurd.
The Gnostics argue otherwise. They point to the words of the servant, after the older son asks what is happening.
Your brother has come, and your father has killed the fatted calf, because he has received him safe and sound.
Again, the ambiguity of the sentence makes two equally valid readings. Either the father has had the fatted calf killed because his son came home safe, or the father has had his son killed because he, the fatted calf, came home safe.
So the Gnostics suggest that the younger son is somehow the fatted calf.
Exactly. The fatted calf is fed grain instead of grass, and purposely fattened. The younger son was given half of his father's wealth and allowed to experience the world. He was made fat with experience, rather than grain, which makes the power gained from his being sacrificed much greater. Moreover, the Gnostics claim, the logic of the parable itself, and the ambiguity of the terms used, indicate that this parable was originally constructed as a Gnostic device, to give two very distinct readings. The surface reading, that tells of God's forgiving nature, and the hidden reading, that demonstrates just what actually awaits the Gnostic, who wishes to return to the traditional Christian community. Here's the thing. Once one is exposed to Gnostic thought, one becomes a danger to the traditional Christian community. In fact, you, Jonathan, along with the crew, and anyone watching this program, have essentially been exposed to, and contaminated with, Gnostic knowledge. Once one perceives Luke chapter 15, from the Gnostic perspective, one has become a carrier of a highly contagious form of understanding.
This is outrageous. Cut the feed. Shut it down.
It is too late now. We have all become Gnostics.